of this world, of this continent, transformed Africa from the Organization of African Unity to the African Union, and eventually the Agenda 2063. And the inspiration behind that was that the leadership at the time needed the kind of mindset necessary to move Africa from the previous fight for unity, fight against colonization, fight against apartheid, to the fight for economic integration and economic transformation. So for a continent aspiring to integrate, aspiring to economically transform, and aspiring to emerge global, we needed a new mindset. And that mindset produced these leaders who have given us this platform upon which now we can stand on, and also be clear that there have been amazing successes. There are a lot of individual successes, and we all know Africans that are matriculated to high institutions, who are leading global organizations, so that we all agree that it's certainly not a shortage of skill, capacity, among others. So what is it? 20 years after debt was relieved, 20 years after we discovered the bond market, 20 years after, the Africa Rising story that we all know, a pandemic comes and then Africa is back again where we were 20, 25 years ago. Or development assistance is withdrawn, and then we're back where we were 20, 25 years ago. So clearly what it means is that there's been some fragmentation in spite of our individual successes, in spite of the great dams we built and the great institutions that we've emerged from. We're still not integrated as we are supposed to be. We're still pretty much fragmented. Africa, as it sits now, without doing anything to it, is comfortably a G7 country, if it were a country. So imagine if we're adding value, imagine if we had those borders moving and we had goods and services moving. So Accra Reset was born out of that conviction that we have to reset the way we, not just our mindset, but also our focus and also the reality within which we operate with. The continent that produces, which is supposed to have the highest disease burden, happens to also be the continent that depends most on development aid for solving its health problems. There's something wrong with that logic, right? It defies logic. And so in the summer of last year, exactly a year ago, President Mahama and other leaders convened a summit in Accra to discuss, just like we're doing here, what are we going to do with this to fill the gaps that have been created by the cut of development financing. And the resounding consensus that came out of that meeting is that there has to be a reset of the whole global development order. Because in Africa's attempt to emerge global, there are things that are happening globally that also affect our ability to integrate locally. And so the Accra Reset was born out of that, and the Accra Reset then launched in the margins of the UNGA, constituted a presidential council. That council currently has about 12 presidents of the council, but the approach is different, which is that they have to look at the project that they can do together. They have to look at things within geo-economic spaces and not just the geopolitical space, but more importantly also to look at three things. One, how do we take health, which no matter what we do, you can build all the planes and the cranes and things like that, you can have billions of dollars, but it has no value in the graveyard if we don't secure our health. So one of the things they've done is to set up the global network, or if you like, the high-level panel for global health reform. Because as much as we try to manufacture our medicines and all of that, if WHO's pre-qualification does not give you the permits and all the things we need to be able to do that and create a kind of regulatory environment, we still will not be able to do that. So seizing the prerogative now to take the things we want to do require that we have a global conversation about some of these things that stand in the way of our ability to integrate. The Global Health Panel for Global Health Reform has just finished its work, and we'll be launching this report at the UN General Assembly. And the recommendations that they will make, these countries that are part of the Accra Reset, and Accra Reset is not just countries in Africa, but also in the global south, most of the countries that were part of the Bandung conference that took place about 50 years ago, with that same mindset of a South Africa having a continent with self-determination, will now begin to look at practical things. If Indonesia, for example, is able to negotiate with China to add value to its nickel, why can't DRC be doing the same with its critical minerals? What lessons are there to be learned, and what exchanges are there to be done with that? So health reform is one of the key things in terms of governance reform. The other flagship is really human capital. And one of the things that we're doing currently, which syncs with what we're doing with the Africa School of Governance, is on negotiation capabilities. How do we build sovereign negotiation capabilities? And then again, back to the challenges we have. We have no shortage of negotiations that Africans have led, whether at the multilateral level, whether at the multinational level, or whether it's Africans in global institutions negotiating for those multinationals. But when it comes to negotiating for Africa, we go to the climate summit and 55 countries are negotiating on their own, Comoros seeking help for its we have Congo in terms of its Nigeria taking our just transition, different countries negotiating for different things. How can we bring us together to negotiate together as a collective force? So the Africa School of Governance in partnership with Afro Champions under the Accra Reset has launched and signed an MOU towards building build capabilities for sovereign negotiators to come here to study. We're currently in the final stages of the curriculum development. First, to harness great skills that exist in people who have negotiated deals, but we don't even know them. They don't even know where they are. The deals they negotiated to build a dam, for example. Can we learn from that? Can we customize and apply that? So sovereign negotiations and building a credentialed network of sovereign negotiators is also part of what we want to do under Accra Reset. And finally, we have the sovereign prosperity spheres, which includes in that a bit of what has been said about mobility, because without mobility, we cannot cross borders. But without skills mobility, even we're doing ourselves a greater disservice. We have lots of skills on this continent when we talk about demographic dividends, but we're still looking for jobs. Europe is looking, is against migration. In fact, there's a big migration crisis going on. But at the same time, they have an aging population that need our jobs. So they're looking for these skills, and we've got the number of visa lotteries that have been done to take skills out of Africa, among others. And yet these are the same skills we need here. So we're launching the first skills mobility platform as part of Accra Reset, together with other global North countries who have come to say, we want to work with you together to build these global platforms. And again, at the UN General Assembly, we'll have a framework for the first e-visa program launched to show how Africans can move skills across the continent without necessarily having to move within these countries, using the kind of digital platforms that our youth and natives are already pioneering. So with that, I'd like to say that Accra Reset is here to demonstrate that Africa's global emergence is possible. Africa's global emergence is already happening because Africa is competing at the global stage already. What we lack is this cohesive power to be able to do not just the mindset shift, which is very important. Mindset being that we live in a world of perpetual turbulence, and that we have to accept that that's the world we live in, and we plan like that. Focus shift, meaning that instead of looking for endless wish lists and targets, hoping that somebody else is going to fund our initiatives for us, we must create our own business models ourselves to finance these things. And then the reality shift being that no matter what we do, we're going to have to accept that there are going to be divergent views of how we see the world. Private sector will see the world different from public sector, the global north, the global south, but we still have to find a way of working together and move ourselves from dependency to sovereignty. Move ourselves from not sovereignty as isolation, but sovereignty as a discipline of delivery and execution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edem. And I'm going to give a big round of